Welcome to Meet the Authors for Two Faces, the book. I'm here today with Nina Wolpe, co-author of the book, and Gordon Nagai. And we have lots of friends and teachers in the room today to find out more about how the book serves as an educational tool. And we also have people that are just interested in writing and are just here to meet the authors. So everyone is very welcome. If you're watching the recording, thank you for accessing the recording. We hope that this is a useful meeting to just share a little bit about what you can use the book for in the classroom and how valuable it would be to have at your local library. Thank you all so much for being here. So to start off today, I would really like to invite Nina and Gordon to speak a little. We'll go to Nina first because she's already unmuted. And just to explain a little bit about her background and why she felt the book was so important for her to put all that time and energy into to create.
It was such a pleasure working with Gordon. It was amazing. We've had years now with this book, haven't we? The effort on this book. And I think we got started on it in early 2014, something like that. We started writing, but we worked on it a little bit even before then, didn't we? And it just seemed to me to come together so brilliantly. When we'd have an idea, it fit in beautifully, and we both worked so well with each other's ideas. And to do it chapter by chapter, the way that turned out to be, our letters back and forth to each other for the most part, it just worked brilliantly. I'm just so in love with this book. I was telling a few of you that I just reread it again last night, and I couldn't put it down. It's just so wonderful because it is from our real experiences for the most part. And that was a unique time in America's history. And we were young, but we've written it a little bit older, just to make it with two children who could have a conversation and be a part of the questions and participation with what was going on in our world. And for Gordon, that's been a lifelong torture and experience. But my goodness, what he's done, he'll just have some wonderful things to tell you. But it has been a joy to have this piece of history out there with such authenticity from two people who did come through that time. And I'm just glad you're all interested in it and we'll share it widely. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move to Gordon. I want to come back to you, Nina, about what actually happened to you during that time. But let's go to Gordon to find out why you felt it was so important for you to write this book.
Well, actually, at the time that Nina and I first talked about it, and that was 2013, I had for maybe some 10 years prior to that, had started talking with a friend of mine's fourth grade class about my family's experiences in the internment camp. She, as a fourth grade teacher, was well aware that in the curriculum in the state of California, there was virtually nothing about this episode in our history. And she felt that was a major lack. She was aware of my family's experiences during the war. So she invited me to sit down with her fourth grade kids and talk. And since that time, I've developed it into a more complex, inclusive PowerPoint presentation. So I had been working on this as part of my own learning, part of my own coming to grips with what my family had experienced. And I gave that presentation to third grade classes up through high school and 2 university classes here at U of O. Anyway, so that was my background. And when Nina brought the question up about us possibly writing a book, without thinking, I said, yes, of course. Afterwards, after we hung up, I thought, my God, what have I gotten myself into? But as she says, it was a pleasure and just a continuing deepening of our relationship as we worked on it together. Initially, her thought was because of the lack of, again, as a teacher, Nina was feeling, with the lack of this information in the school curriculums across the country, it was really important that my story get out there. And in fact, her one thought was that it could actually stand alone as the major story. My thought from the beginning was, while my story was lacking in curricula for school children, her family's experience, although it was familiar probably to most of America, the intertwining of our two story arcs was what I thought was an important element in telling this story. Anyway, so it was just a marvelous experience, and it gave us a chance to be in touch with each other again and talk and just kind of commiserate and help each other editing and doing the creative working part of it.
Beautiful. Is there I'm sure most people will be familiar with the storyline before they come to a meeting like this, but would you be able to summarize what happened to you in the course of the book? What did you write about?
Well, the story starts actually on December 7th, 1941. And Nina and I are both 10-year-olds in school. And my family later that afternoon begins to hear about what happened in Pearl Harbor. And of course, our whole world starts to get dark and to crumble around us. And then while after that date, Nina and I are in school together, and she is a protector of me because I begin to receive full assaults and criticisms because I was Japanese. Well, eventually the government issued the order for all persons of Japanese ancestry to be evacuated. So my family ended up traveling by train to the southeastern corner of Colorado to Camp Amache, where we were for the duration of the war. My story includes my experiences in camp and experiences of my sister, who was, actually, she was the one who was 10 years old and I was 4 years old at the time. But for our story, I flipped it so that I was the 10-year-old and she was the 4-year-old. Anyway, so I relate in my story experiences in camp, most of which are actual experiences that I remember. And then coming back from camp after the war, again, Nina is my protector because the other kids are still smarting from Pearl Harbor, and the racial prejudice is sort of running rampant. And then we end the story, the two of us kind of catching up with each other about what happened to us during the time and our experiences with family. So that's basically the story.
Yeah, and going over to you, Nina, what was your story arc within the book?
My story is pretty much the child's story from World War II, except my dad met a woman while he was being stationed in England, and he was very vulnerable from his position in a bomb, a base, a military base, and the German planes were flying over it frequently, and his pilots were going out of way. The death in all of that action was just so traumatic for him. And the woman was a peaceful presence in his life, helping him. And he ended up asking my mom for a divorce at the end of the war and marrying her. And that was not so common for the children. A lot of children lost their fathers through death, but my last name changed, and we moved into a situation that was not a good situation. You'll read about it in the book. And so I was traumatically damaged by what happened with my father and my mom and my family. And that's pretty much my story toward the end of the book as he comes home at the end of the war. But the rest of it was pretty much helping during the war. The children would go out with wagons and go through the neighborhood and pick up old metal that families didn't want. And they'd pick up shoelaces and string balls of string, just anything that could be, their nylon stockings. Women didn't wear nylon stockings during World War II. That was all used for parachutes and things that the military guys needed. So it was still family, and that was a strong part in my life with my grandfathers, grandmothers, my mother, and aunts and uncles and cousins. Family was still very vibrant in my childhood life.
We actually have a teacher in the meeting today, Melanie Rizzo, who had who wanted to share this book with her class. And I'd love to hear from Melanie what type of teaching you do, and how kids responded to it, and which of the themes do you think that they responded to the most, and why you think this book was useful within the classroom setting.
Thank you. I am a social studies teacher, 6th grade students. I had one of my classes, I have 5 classes. I had one class read it. They love history. Their interest in history just goes beyond. I mean, I'm so pleased with them. But what I really enjoyed about this book as well, beyond the historical aspect of it, and I think this goes to what Nina was just talking about too, that it's also perspective taking. And that is something that we teach in 6th grade through writing, that it was the perspective of both of you. Mm-hmm. And also there's a lot of social emotional things that could be taught through the book. And I found that very, very beneficial as well. They loved, I've got it right here, all the historical photos that are in it. And as an educator, of course, of geography, I love the maps in it. And at the end, there are these questions. There's pre-reading, after reading, there's assignments, there's discussion and research questions. For me as an educator, that just brought it all together. And I was very appreciative of having that in the book as well. And they're very deeper thinking questions, not what color shirt was he wearing. So I really appreciate that.
We had the pleasure of bringing Nina into the class and
so much fun.
Doing a Q&A. And I think it was interesting, the kinds of questions that the kids wanted to ask, because they weren't about, what happened historically in the war. It was about, how did you cope with this, Nina? Mm-hmm. What did you notice about that, Melanie, first? And then I'll go to Nina to get her perspective on how the kids reacted.
Because social emotional teaching is so big in schools right now, I think a lot of the kids wanted to know, how did you feel? What did that make you think? What did that, they wanted to know Nina's feelings behind this. They read the book, they knew what happened in the book, but they wanted to keep delving into, what does that make you think? So I appreciated that.
It's interesting because that's what Gordon and I put in there. We just really wanted each of our experiences to that level. And what I wanted from your kids was, what did you feel?
And
yet their questions were, what were you feeling? It was fascinating.
And they came back with the same type of questions. Yeah. And I appreciate that level on it. And it's something that they can relate to because of
Yes.
the age in the book as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Melanie. The kids really respond so much to this book, and that's really the proof of its worthiness for reading. And Mom, how did you feel about, you know, that visit? Because we're open to visiting other schools or doing it more
Oh,
Zoom.
absolutely. Gordon, you've already done so much of this through the years, haven't you? At all grade levels, even college, right, Gordon?
Yeah, you just need to.
Oh, that's right.
And Gordon had mentioned, if you don't mind me, he had mentioned a slideshow that he had. If that would be available, I would love to have that for maybe my next year's class as well. I already have the video introduction video to the book. I think that would be great. But I just love the questions that are in the back of the book. I mean, as a teacher, that is top-notch resource. So I appreciate that. Thank you both of you.
And after I finished that and the days after doing it with you and your children, I just kept thinking I should not have asked so many questions of them. I should have just let them ask what was inside here after reading the book. I think they had a lot to ask those questions were about the feelings, you know, that Gordon and I went through in those years.
Yeah, it's pretty unique for kids to get an opportunity to even meet an author as well of a book, you know, and to meet one that had those real experiences is so valuable. Melanie?
Yeah, most definitely. I think they were a little awestruck at first. But it was such a great experience for them, and I really appreciate you coming to the classroom. So
anybody else? Be fun to do it.
I have a comment to add here. Melanie, my daughter is currently working on my PowerPoint presentation, putting my narrative to it. Normally, what I've been doing is I've been reading a script to go along with the PowerPoint, but my voice is getting to a point now where it gets very raspy and I'm very hoarse. So I have recorded my voice going through the narrative. She's putting that together with the PowerPoint presentation. When that is done, I'll be sure to send a copy to Nina. She can get it to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, probably
excellent idea. I appreciate that. Thank you, Gordon.
Have we met everybody here on the screen?
Yeah,
okay.
There's just my aunt joined. Eileen, it's great to see that you've joined there. But before we go to kind of more chatting and more Q&A, I just wanted to tell everybody who may not already know what we have at the back of the book that is so useful. So the first thing you'll find at the back of the book is a glossary, and that does include some of the Japanese terms that Gordon's family would have been using, and which is one of the interesting things for me. I love languages. I studied languages, and I've studied Japanese. But when a word is used regularly, like within a cultural context, you know, like that idea that we're just going to get on with it, and there's a couple of words like that. Maybe Gordon, you'd like to speak about that for a moment.
I'm sorry, what?
I was just wondering, would you like to mention the words that you mentioned at the back of the book in the glossary? Issei and Nisei, the Japanese immigrants born in Japan and the Japanese Americans born in the US. Their words. And then there was some other words that you guys were talking about in the book. The idea of shame, hagi.
Yeah, hagi, yes. Go back to the first words that you mentioned. The first generation are considered, and these are people born in Japan that come as immigrants, are called issei. And that is taken from the Japanese word for one, ichi. So issei is the first generation. Second generation is nisei. Number two is ni, ichi, ni. So I'm actually considered a second generation. I was born here in this country. My mother was also born in this country. She was born near San Jose, California. So she's actually also second generation. But my understanding culturally, you follow the father's line. So since he was first generation Issei, I would be the second generation Nisei. If I followed my mother's line, I would be a Sansei. I would be third generation. But as I say, culturally, you follow the father's line. The one phrase that I use quite often in the book is shikata ga nai, and that in Japanese means it can't be helped. So anytime something bad happens or there's a problem, it's shikata ga nai, and you just kind of pick things up and move on. You don't sit there and wallow in it. Anyway, there are a number of Japanese words there that help give a feeling for the culture or kind of the mindset of people of Japanese ancestry.
I really like that, because that is another angle that you could use in the educational context, you know, is exploring Japanese culture. So I'm glad that that was added in here at the back, and that, you know, it's been highlighted. And then as you go through the book, there's some amazing photos, and the timeline is the next thing. So this is talking about the timeline during the book. So it doesn't start at the start of the war. It starts at the start of the attack on Pearl Harbor, which is when your guys' lives were most affected because because of that. And then the internment, and then eventually the second generation volunteers were able to volunteer for the military. So they actually fought in the war. You've got the rescue of Texas, which I know absolutely nothing about, but then I'm from Ireland, as some of you might have guessed by hearing my accent. So, and then the Amachi pilgrimages. So this is just a little bit about how you dealt with what happened to you by going back later. Is that right, Gordon?
Yes. My daughter graduated from the University of Colorado in Boulder, and I always forget the year. I want to say 1995. But anyway, the year that we went back for a graduation, my son and daughter insisted that I make a pilgrimage to Camp Amachi. Camp Amachi is right along the Kansas border in the southeastern corner, way, way tucked in the bottom corner of the state. Anyway, so it took us 3 or 4 hours to drive from Boulder to Granada, which is the little town. And we visited the campsite, and I have some pictures that show the foundations of the building. There wasn't a building there. Some of the internees had built a little shack that housed a memorial, marble memorial block. It was all in Japanese, so I couldn't read it, but that was the only thing that was there. There was also a monument to the 31 men who had served in the military and had died in combat. That was a memorial to those 33 men. But for me, it was, I'm not sure exactly what I was expecting. Since there were no buildings, there was nothing that I could tie it to any memories about what happened in camp. But it was a very solemn experience for me, and my kids kind of gave me space to experience whatever I was. I think I cried a lot inside. I didn't cry outside, but it was a very painful and in many ways a healing experience. I think part of what I was experiencing that day was thinking about what my mom and dad experienced I mean, they were obviously adults. My mother was an American citizen, and she had all of her rights stripped away, and she was behind barbed wire. My dad could not become an American citizen, and he was behind barbed wire, thought of and considered as an enemy alien. So that day partly was for me to kind of heal and remember, but also I was hopefully healing for my parents who it had to be a very devastating experience to be there.
Absolutely.
And now Gordon Campamachi has been become a national memorial to all of that, right? Biden just recently designated it that way, right?
Yes, in 2022,
Okay.
President Biden signed into law making Campamachi a national park. And plans were in place. I don't know if they've actually implemented it yet. Plans were in place to reconstruct one of the barracks and have an educational center there, informational center for visitors. But it's now a national park.
It should be wonderful to be able to visit. So coming back to the back of the book and some of the resources, if we may, this is the background of loyalty questionnaire. So the first and second generation Japanese Americans were given this at age, if they were 17 and over, to pledge basically their loyalty to the USA. Gordon, would you like to speak about that just for a moment? Because I know there's some interesting facts about the questions and what it was about for young people and the adults who had to sign this.
Yeah, there were 28 questions, and kind of on the surface, the administration of the camp under the authority of the U.S. Army gave this questionnaire, 28 questions. And on the surface of it, people were told that this was just a simple information questionnaire. The last two questions, though, actually delved into an area that the adults in the community were suspicious of, because it looked like they were trying to determine if a person was a patriot to the United States, or if they were sympathetic with the Emperor of Japan. The question 27 had to do with whether or not the person was willing to serve in the U.S. military if called. Well, my father, as an immigrant alien, was not a U.S. citizen, so he could not serve in the U.S. military. So if he said no, there was a question of whether or not he was sympathetic to the emperor. But if he said yes, it was a meaningless response, because as a non-citizen, he couldn't serve in the military anyway. So that was a difficult situation for all of the first generation Iseis. The second question, the number 28, had to do with whether you would commit totally to the U.S. President and give up any support for the Japanese emperor. Well, it had two parts to the question: whether or not you were patriotic to the U.S. president or to the Japanese emperor. Well, for the first generation Issei, if they said no to giving support to the U.S. president, again, they would be suspect. If they said no to giving up any affiliation or support of the emperor, again, they were thought of as possible spies. The difficulty was the first generation Issei because they were not US citizens, if they gave up any support of the emperor, they would give up their citizenship rights to Japan, and they would become people without a country. So it was a terrible, terrible dilemma that people were placed under. And both my parents, my mother and my father, ended up saying yes to both questions. Yes, yes. My father, I think, said yes to the second one, knowing that he was ending up without a country that he could claim as his own. Now, he was here from 1917 anyway, and he had wanted to become a citizen. So it was not, in a way, it was not an issue, but emotionally, it had to hit him pretty hard.
Yeah, and that could be interesting to speak about in a classroom. One of the last things that you have in the resources is the letter of apology. And of course, the later on, in 1990, George Bush sent out a letter to all surviving internees. And actually, there was a payment. Each letter contained a check for $20,000 for the injustice of unlawful imprisonment of internees, both those who were Japanese immigrants and Japanese Americans by birth. Gordon, would you like to tell us what that meant for you?
Well, let me tell you about what it meant to my mother. My father had died before the letter was sent out, and my mother was just really upset that he did not receive his letter of apology. My mother, a quirk of fate, whoever was responsible for sending out these letters, and I can understand the urgency of getting them out because the elder Japanese were beginning to die off pretty heavily. The letter that they sent out was on substandard letter paper. It was smaller than the regular stationery, and it did not have the White House seal at the top. My mother was appreciative of getting that, but when my letter came on standard stationery with the White House seal at the top, she was really upset. She thought, the way she described it, she got a substandard apology. Mm-hmm. When she died, she still had $500 from that $20,000 in her bank account. She said, she told me at one point that she would have given back the $20,000 to have actually received a formal, appropriate letter of apology. So for her, it was a very painful experience. For me, one of the things I got from my parents was a love of my country. And to me, that letter sealed it, that even though the country had made a grievous error in the evacuation and internment, Congress, and with the signature of the president, did eventually turn that all around and sent this very formal, official, much appreciated letter of apology. To me, the $20,000, that wasn't so much of importance. The letter is what I value. And again, it reinforced my belief in the country.
Yeah. I'm so glad we had a chance to talk about all of that at the back of the book, because a lot of people may or may not take the time to look at that. We are going to do some Q&A right now. If anybody wants to add anything, make a comment, if you've read the book and you'd like to recommend it, this will all be part of today's recording. And when we stop recording, we will continue to have a short chat. But is anybody interested in making any comment or asking any question? Marilyn?
Yes, I'd like to ask Gordon a question, and after I get the answer, follow up with a statement. I think I heard you say that you had presented your story at the University of Oregon. a University of Oregon class. I'd like to know how many times did you do this? What kind of class was it? And what level were these people? Freshmen, sophomore, juniors, seniors, graduate?
I gave the presentation to two classes. One was an anthropology class, and one was a class in the ethnic studies department. One class, they were freshmen and sophomores, so they were young kids. But that was a good experience. The other class was, and I don't remember which one was which now, but the second class was a class that there were older students in it that were going back to school to further their education and get advanced degrees. So it was a mixture of regular college students and then men and women who were like in their 40s and 50s. In both classes, I asked what kind of experiences they had in their high schools in terms of education around the evacuation and internment. And I was surprised. There were probably 2/3 of the class that raised their hand that they did in fact have some form of education around the evacuation and internment. That was a surprise to me. Now, I didn't go into detail to find out what they were taught, what their study consisted of, but anyway, that was one element that was a surprise to me.
My follow-up is that professors teach teachers who teach students. And I, based on my own experience, hope that you can do a lot more at the college level and combined with the School of Education somehow. I got my degree in education with a double major in sociology and history. And I do admit this was a long time ago, but it wasn't that far after all this happened either. I never heard one word about it. Consequently, I didn't teach about it because I didn't know to teach about it. And so I think that in addition to whatever can be done on the elementary, junior high school level, it would be a good idea to put a lot of focus on getting into those college classes and teaching those who are going to be teaching history and sociology or like kinds of classes at a lower level than college. I'd like to think that we learn off our past mistakes. I'm not so sure I believe that anymore, but I keep hoping that if we can give this kind of education to students as they grow up, we will be able to recognize the value in every human being. Thank you.
Yeah, and avoid repeating.
Amen.
History.
Yes.
I have sent a package of information, including a copy of the book, to University of Oregon here in Eugene and Oregon State up in Corvallis, but I haven't heard back from either one yet. But I'll pursue that because I agree with you. Teaching teachers to teach is a good way for us to proceed.
Yeah, and if anybody ever has contact or knows someone that we should get in touch with, please let us know. Melanie, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you. This kind of piggybacks off something Gordon and Marilyn were talking about. When we started reading Two Faces, I asked my students what they had known about World War II, Japan, the relationships, Japanese people in the US, and I had, out of 30, 2 students who actually did know something about Japanese internment camps in the US, which surprised me for 6th grade students. But a lot of eyes were opened. A lot of eyes were opened and had, no idea that anything like that had occurred here. Many of them were like, what do you mean? Is this real? I'm like, yeah, this is real. and just, the awareness was very life-changing for many of them.
Excellent.
I would hope that the parents had discussions with them too. Maybe the parents were enlightened too and want to read a book and learn more about that history too.
Yeah, I
Yes.
believe middle school is a great time to start something like this,
Yeah. Yeah.
just to have that awareness.
Read.
Thank you for your question, Marilyn.
Yes.
Kate, you'd like to say something?
Yeah, this is something that makes me really sad. The one of my son's very closest friends is Japanese. I think he's Gen Z generation. And my son says, I haven't met his family, but my son says that his family just doesn't want to talk about this situation, that I think it's wonderful that Gordon is willing to talk about it. And I have another friend here in Bend who's a Japanese physical therapist, probably also Gen Z, and he has given some presentations around Bend, but my son has said, please don't bring this up around Daryl. Wait and see if Daryl brings it up. That it's just something that Japanese family apparently isn't ready to talk about, and this is, generations later.
Yes, yes. I think that's not unusual. Culturally, Japanese tend not to want to talk about things that are bad that have happened to their themselves or their families, and anything that involved like being in jail, being in prison, that's a stain on the family name, and so that especially is something that they would not talk about. Also, with that generation, many of them were well aware that constitutional rights were totally violated. But knowing that puts them in a position of, do I say something or not? And do I go against the cultural norm of shikataganai, just bearing it? Or do I say something? And do I say something that puts me in a bad light with the government? So it's a very difficult thing for people, particularly of that generation. And I think that cultural aspect played a big part in probably most of my generation, second generation, most did not want to talk about that experience. And I only started because my friend, Diane, invited me to her fourth grade class. How could I say no, But that started me in a more serious way of putting together a presentation to talk about my family's experiences.
This would be true for loads of ethnic groups in America. Just the slavery situation and the Jewish situation. And as a war comes up, then those people are involved in retribution and anger, and especially with a society as diverse as ours is. We have so many historical moments that are hurtful and painful and dangerous, and lots of families carry loads.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end of today's session. We have another question. Bruce.
Okay. Yeah, I have a question of Gordon, especially given, like states like Florida, you look at your book is not pulled from the library there. But My son teaches in Japan. He's been in Nagoya for about 5 years now, and he teaches English. How do you think that book would be accepted there?
Oh, good question.
Huh?
Um,
I've never even thought of that.
I think it could do well there. I think on one level, particularly amongst young people, there's an interest in what goes on in America culturally and socially.
Yeah.
And I think that Japan now is really looking back at World War II with a more open stance to learn. And I think learning about what happened in the United States during that time, I think would be something that they would be interested in.
Yeah, I want to send him a book.
One more
He's been there
question.
5 years. Go ahead, sorry.
Thank you, Bruce, for your question. Hopefully you can send a book over to your son.
Well,
Thank you.
We'll send a box.
Lisa.
Just wanted to mention my father was served in World War II in the South Pacific, and he was the first one. Even though I'd heard about the Japanese internment camps, I didn't know a lot about it. He really instilled in me how wrong that he thought that was. That there was no reason to believe that these people here were a danger and that shouldn't have happened. And he remember him talking, about the war. For only a few times I saw my dad cry, and one was when he lost his mother, one was when he lost his daughter, one was when he was talking about some of the things he witnessed, which I won't go into all of them, but one in particular was they were trying to secure the finance building in Manila, in the Philippines. And he said there was a dead Japanese soldier that was leaning against the wall, had a monkey. The monkey was crying and screeching and petting his face. My dad cried, and he said, felt at that time, witnessing that and the other things he witnessed, he said, I felt like the animals had more compassion than the humans did. So it really affected me too.
Thank you for
I'm glad
sharing.
you're sharing your stories. I think a
Thank
lot
you.
of people still don't know about all of the history.
It's true.
Yeah. So we're talking about Two Faces, the book. We thank Gordon and Nagai and Nina Wolpe and the authors. Would either of you like to say anything before we finish today's recording? We're all good?
I'd like to say thank you very much for the book and for bringing this to our attention. I think that we oftentimes tend to let things slide, overlook. They're hurtful. We'd rather not look at them, but we need to look at them. And so I thank you for bringing all this to us.
I also would like to thank you for at the level that this book is written. It is an easy read for young readers, and I appreciate that.
Good.
Thank you everyone for being here.
You know how to order the book and how to get a
Absolutely.
box of books.
Yes, we are actually, you can order the book on their website, TwoFacesBook.com. We have a Facebook page, we have a YouTube page, and this meeting will be on the YouTube page. But I am going to do the competition. We do have a competition for everyone. The prize is 10 books for your library or school. Number 9, Mary Jane McQueen. You have won 10 books to give to your local library or school.
Great.
Thank you so much. We'll make sure to get that to you very soon.
Thank all of you for participating today.
And Mary Jane's actually in Canada. So yeah, you need to tell all the Canadians that about what happened here. Thank you, Mary Jane.
And thank you for that. And it's
Maybe
true.
when it's over,
I think
this is about the
it happened.
Japanese thing.
It happened here
So I
as
don't
well.
think they want it.
So there was internment camps in Canada as well.
Gosh,
And so I'm not sure how many people actually, if this generation, I know of my parents' generation, many people knew of it. But I'm not really sure of the younger generations, how many people do know. I think it's the same circumstance as it would be in the US. A lot of people don't understand what happened and how wrong that was. So thank you. I look forward to receiving and sharing. Thank you.
so much. So thank you everyone for listening. And we hope you enjoy Two Faces, the book, and that you share this story with many people.
is she wanting something right
Thank
here?
you for coming today.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, it was wonderful.